Good evening. For those of you watching at home, just to let you know, the camera does add about 50 pounds, so everybody here knows I'm very skinny. Greetings, my name is Brother Joachim. I'm one of the friars of the Renewal, and it's just a great pleasure to be with you here tonight. And if you want to get an early start on confession, feel free to get started. I will not be offended if you get up and go receive mercy while I am talking. I'd actually be honored if you did. I always get asked by the friars to give this talk. I think the reason is because, well, at least what they tell me, is I'm so good at sin that I should be able to give this talk very easily. So I like to just give this talk, and I talk about my life. I talk about my life, where I come from, how I grew up, and how I encountered God. So I grew up not too far from here. I grew up in Massachusetts, Fall River, Massachusetts. So it's good for me. I root for winning sports teams. So sorry for the rest of you here, when I grew up, there was no winners in Massachusetts. So it's only since I've become a friar. But I grew up in Fall River, Massachusetts. Grew up in a Catholic family. My mom, a very, very faithful Catholic woman. My dad, not so much. He was Catholic, but he didn't go to Mass. He would go on Christmas, and we'd always went to midnight Mass, and my dad would be snoring in the back, which always made me laugh, and my mom really angry, which made me laugh even more. And I went to Catholic school. So I see some sisters here. Sisters, are you teachers? I'm so sorry. I went to Catholic school, and I was taught by the Sisters of No Mercy. I know these sisters have much mercy, but I was taught by the Sisters of No Mercy in Fall River. And as I went to school there, does anybody have a grade they really enjoyed? I enjoyed 6th grade a lot. I enjoyed it so much I did it twice. And that was by my mother's choice. I actually had grades good enough to pass. I was doing well enough to pass. And my mom, a tough Portuguese mom, she goes to the parent-teacher night, the conference, and she was told by the sisters that I was the class clown. And my mom says, "Oh, keep him back a year. Let's see if he thinks that's funny." And the sister's like, Are you serious? She's like, yeah. So my mom was tough. So I was held back in 6th grade, and I didn't want to go to Catholic school. I didn't like wearing a uniform. And so I just did not want to be there at all. And so I decided that I was going to torture the nuns until they kicked me out. That's why I said, I'm so sorry, sisters. So I usually tell one of the stories of how I got kicked out of Catholic school, youth group. You might enjoy this. Don't do this when you go to school, okay? So 6th grade, that was the time I got my first set of house keys. I don't know if any of you remember when you got your first set of house keys, but I have an older sister. My sister had gotten married at this point. My brother was gone in the Navy. I was the youngest, and so my family decided to give me house keys, which was good. And my set of keys, we had a deadbolt and a doorknob lock. And back then, you had to have 2 keys for 2 different locks. They didn't have a thing where you had 1 key for 1 lock or keyless entry. Only people who had keyless entry was the robbers in my neighborhood. So I got these 2 keys, and I remember receiving them, and I was just so happy. I just felt like a man for the first time in my life because I could come and go as I pleased now, as long as my parents knew where I was. And I got these keys, and They're beautiful. I would look at them. They were shiny. They were gold. They were precious, right? And I would have them, and I was holding them in class. And I sat up against the wall in class, a few seats back. And I remember sitting there in class. Sister Gilmary was writing on the board, teaching something. And I was looking at my keys, and then I look over and I look at the wall, and there's the outlet. And I got 2 keys, and there's 2 holes in that outlet. And so I kind of squunched myself down a little bit, got the keys nice and close to the outlet, getting him inching over and over, closer and closer. And I wasn't completely stupid. I didn't just shove my keys right into the outlet because I would have been a friar at a really young age. I just kind of eased them too, and as soon as I touched the very edge of the outlet, I heard a pop, and then black smoke starts coming out of the wall. And I quickly started waving the smoke away and just sitting there, tucked my keys away, and I'm looking around, and nobody noticed anything. And I raised my hand, Sister Gilmary. I said, Sister Gilmary. She said, yes? I said, the clock stopped. The clock above her head had stopped. Now, in school, it always felt like time stopped, but this time it really did. And so Sister Gilmary sees that, and Sister Gilmary, at least to me at that time, Sister Gilmary was 80 years old, and she was rather chubby, and Sister Gilmary goes down 3 flights of stairs and changes. Do you remember when we had the old fuses? You had to screw them out and put a new one in. She had to do that, and then she comes back up 3 flights of stairs, out of breath. She's like, the clock's going. I was like, yes, sister, the clock's going. So she goes back, working on the board. I take my keys back out, pop, black smoke. And so Sister Gilmary went up and down the stairs about 40 times that day. And I was inspired at that moment. I knew what my vocation was. I was going to become a personal trainer because Sister Gilmary had lost 20 pounds in just one class period. But the sisters, they dashed my dreams. They kicked me out of school, and I went off to public school for a lot more reasons than just that, right? So I went to public school, and I enjoyed it. I played sports. I was doing very well. 7th grade, I was a little bit of a troublemaker, just a little bit. 7th grade, we were at a Say No to Drugs rally in my school, and that's where I bought my first joint. And started doing drugs in 7th grade. My dad, at that time, was a functional alcoholic. He used to keep a keg of beer down in the basement, and my job was to run downstairs and fill up a pitcher for him about every 30 minutes, every hour, bring it up. And so when I would go downstairs to fill up his pitcher of beer, I would make sure I got a drink as well. So at a very young age, I was already abusing alcohol and doing drugs. Still going to church because my mom made me. Thank you, moms who make your children go to church. It is a great thing to do. So I kind of just kept on going through life. 10th grade, I made confirmation. And in 10th grade, I had the first tragedy of my life. My grandmother had passed away. And my grandmother was a really holy Portuguese woman, would always tell me about Fatima. And so it was hard. It was hard. And I remember being really angry with God because this woman who I loved was now taken away, and I was so angry. I never thought that this was what my grandmother wanted all along, right? Her whole desire was forever to be with Jesus in heaven. And I was selfish. I wanted her for myself. So I got really angry with God, and at that point, my parents decided to move down to Florida, and I moved down to Florida. And since I had received confirmation, I graduated from church, right? I didn't have to go to church anymore, so I chose that I was no longer going to do that. And my mom was just really, really upset with me for that. And as I'm in Florida, still in high school, I start to realize that there's something different about Florida than Massachusetts. Florida has beautiful beaches. And those beautiful beaches had beautiful women. And I was a teenage boy. So I stopped going to school. And I remember coming home, and I told my parents I dropped out. And my dad, as you can imagine, was not very happy. Neither was my mom. My dad said, "Son, here you go to school or you pay rent." I said, "I'll pay rent." And I moved out because I wasn't going to pay rent to my parents. Got a job working road construction. And during that time, my entire life was based on, I'd work hard Monday through Thursday, and then Friday through Sunday, I would drink hard and I would do drugs hard. One day I was at work in Florida. It was early morning. It was February, and there was a dense, dense fog. And I remember I had to get to the other side of the road. And so I'm watching traffic come, and I see there's a break after this car coming here, and I should be able to make it all the way across because I don't see anything coming there. So as this car passes me, I take a quick step out, and boom! There was a car tailgating right behind that car. And I went up into the windshield, put my imprint in that windshield, and I went 45 feet through the air. I didn't go 45 feet high, just 45 feet through the air, about 10 feet high. And I landed on my knees, on the asphalt. And that is exactly what I needed. I needed to be brought to my knees. I needed to be brought to my knees. As I hit and then rolled into the grass, and I was laying on the ground, wind knocked out of me, I couldn't breathe, and I believed at that moment I was dying. And I remember at that moment thinking, I'm going to hell. I'm going to hell. I didn't think to call out for mercy. I didn't think to call out for Jesus. I just knew how I was living, and I knew what I deserved. And as I'm laying there and I can't breathe, all I'm saying to myself is, I can't die. I can't die. I can't go to hell. I can't die. I can't die. And then the wind came back. And I remember at that moment, a friend of mine that I was working with, a guy named Luis, really good guy. Luis tells the story of when I got hit by the car. Luis was about 50, 60 feet away from me. Luis hears a big bang. And he says, and he looks up in the sky, and he says, "That's a big bird. And it's flying really low." And then I hit, and I rolled to him. And Luis came to me right away. I remember Luis coming to me, and Luis wanting to know if I was okay, and I couldn't speak because I couldn't breathe. And he went running to the yard trailer on the job site to call 911. My godfather was working with me at the time. My godfather comes running over. And at this point, the wind has come back to me. The guy who hit me pulled over, and he starts yelling, "I was only going 5 miles an hour. I was only going 5. There's no way he was going 5. Look at me. There's no way the guy was going 5 miles an hour and he moved this 45 feet. Not going to happen. So I'm laying there, and I didn't know it at the time. I didn't know what my injuries were. I remember I had blood trickling down my nose because I could see the blood coming out from the outside of my nose, and I thought I had broken my nose. I remember just 5 minutes prior to this, I think I'm dying and going to hell. Now my thought is, oh no, I broke my nose. I'm not going to be able to pick up any girls at the club tonight. Stupid, right? So I'm laying there. This guy's saying he's only going 5 miles an hour. I try to get up to fight the guy. My godfather's holding me down. My godfather can see my arm. My arm is sliced all the way down to the bone. My muscles and tendons were cut in half. And I'm laying there trying to fight this guy. Eventually the ambulance comes. The ambulance, the paramedic says, "Are you okay?" And I said, "I've fallen and I can't get up." I kept my sense of humor. I got to the hospital, and as I was laying in the hospital, I kept looking over as they were sewing my muscle and my tendons back together. And they're like, "What are you doing?" I was like, "My muscles are out. I want to see them." The nurse is like, "Are you serious?" I was like, "Yeah." So they got a mirror so I could watch my muscles being sewn back together. And let me tell you, they're impressive. So there I was, laying on the bed. My mom hears from my godfather what's going on. And my mom, being the Portuguese mom that she is, called my entire family and told them my arm was dangling off and they were going to amputate it. As far as I know, that was never an issue. They were never going to amputate my arm. It was never dangling off. Yeah, I was cut all the way to the bone, but that was the extent of my injuries. That was the extent of my injuries. My mom, when she did finally come in the room and saw me, she started to cry. She said, "Your guardian angel was watching over you." And I didn't really believe in God at that point in my life, even though I believed I was going to hell. But I thought, that makes sense. That makes sense, because if you get hit by a car and you go 45 feet through the air, you die. That's what happens, you die. Not only did I not die, I had 0 major injuries. Not a single broken bone. So I get out of the hospital, and my brother flies in. My brother was in the Navy. He was stationed in Norfolk, Virginia. And he comes to visit me. Even though I told him, "Don't come, I'm fine." My brother sees me, he goes, "Oh, you're fine." I was like, "I told you." But we go to Blockbuster Video. Do you guys remember Blockbuster Videos? So for the youth group back there, we couldn't just order a movie at our house or on our phone. We didn't even have cell phones. I know, hard to believe, but we didn't have cell phones when I was your age. So we used to go to this place and get videos and bring them back to our house, watch them, and bring them back to the place. So I'm at the place with my brother, Blockbuster Video, picking out a movie, and I'm walking back to my car, and I'm sorry, because I know this is going to offend many of you, but this woman sees me as I'm going back to the car with my brother, and she comes out of the car, she goes, "Oh my gosh, are you okay? You look horrible." I had road rash all over my body. And I looked at the woman, and I said, "I'm going to be fine, but when I get fine, you're still going to be fat, old, and ugly." I was a jerk. So I go home, and I decide I should start going back to church. And I started going back to church, but I wasn't doing anything when I went to church. I wasn't praying. I wasn't listening to the words being spoken. I wasn't listening to the words of Scripture. I wasn't listening to the words of the homily. I was just there. I was just there. Much like I was through my youth when I had to go to church. I was just there. Unthankful and bitter. And I remember getting better, thinking, I don't really need God. And so I stopped going to church again. Fast forward a few years, and my brother, who was in the Navy, my brother had gotten really sick. My brother, I would visit him every Christmas. I would go visit him. And my brother had gotten really sick. My brother was HIV positive. And I remember going to visit with him this one particular Christmas, and my brother had lost a lot of weight. And he told me, he said, I can feel God and Satan fighting for my soul. And me and my brother never spoke about these sort of things. We always talked about sports. And so I was kind of taken aback. I was like, oh, okay. And he was like, who wins the fight isn't up to them. It's up to me. And I was like, oh, okay. And he says, I chose God. And I was like, good? Because choosing the devil would be bad, right? I was like, good. And my brother could tell I was really uncomfortable. And so he left the conversation at that, but he wanted me to know that he had chosen God. A few months after that visit, I got a call from my brother. His health was fading quickly, and he wanted to move back to Massachusetts. He was going to move in with my sister. He wanted to die in our hometown. He wanted to be buried by my grandparents. And so I drove my brother up from Virginia back to Massachusetts, and I left. And I went back down to Florida. And I just started to reflect occasionally on life. But I just felt so uncomfortable still thinking about these things. Life, death, heaven, hell. And I get a call one night. My parents had gone up to be with my brother, and I had just started a new job, so I stayed home. And it took my brother 15 minutes, because he couldn't breathe, 15 minutes to say, I love you. I told him I loved him too. I hung up the phone, and that night was the first time I've ever prayed in my life. And I said, God, take him. God, take him. He suffered enough. Just take him. I went to work the next day. I drove home, and my godmother was waiting outside my house, and I knew what that meant. So she drove me right to the airport, bought a ticket, and flew up to be with my family for my brother's funeral. When I landed, my cousin picked me up from the airport, drove me directly to the funeral home for the wake. My sister was waiting for me with a letter from my brother. My brother wrote a pretty long letter to me, but the gist of it was simply this. Being a man is not about how much weight you can lift. It's not about how many women you can sleep with. It's not about how much drugs you can do or how much booze you can drink. Being a man is knowing who God is and knowing who you are before him. After the funeral, I flew home and I prayed for the second time in my life. I said, God, if you exist, prove it to me. Prove it to me, because I don't want to be somebody who's, well, I don't know, I'm not sure. I want to know. Prove it to me, or I'm done with all this questioning stuff. I need to know. Now, that next Sunday, I went to Mass. And the Sunday after that. And the Sunday after that. And I started to pray. And I started to listen. And the words of Scripture were proclaimed. I could hear the voice of God. In the homilies, I got good advice for life. I had stopped going to the clubs on Saturday night, and I had a simple reason for that. I didn't like to hear the organ with a hangover. And so I would hang out with my friends still, and I remember we were making plans one weekend, and my friends were like, hey, you haven't been coming out with us on Saturday nights. And I was like, yeah, no. Like, why not? And I was like, oh, because I've been going to church on Sundays, and I just don't want to hear the organ with a hangover. And one of my friends says, oh, you're a little church boy now. I said, you want to go outside? He's like, no, it's good. You want to go to church? Fine. Through that conversation, one of my other friends was getting ready to get married. He was brought up in a Protestant church. He was baptized. And the woman he was going to marry was a Catholic. And so he wanted to know about this whole Catholic thing. So he said, hey, I don't want my fiance to know about this. Would you take me, to meet with somebody about maybe becoming Catholic? I was like, yeah, come on through. So we go to the church to meet with the woman who ran religious education for adults. And I had noticed her. I recognized who she was, because the previous Sunday she had asked if anybody would want to volunteer. They were looking for a 4th grade catechism teacher for the kids. And so just wanted to prove, hey, I'm a good Catholic. I said, hey, did you get that 4th grade religion teacher? She goes, oh, would you like to do it? And I was like, no. That's not what I'm asking. I was asking if you got one. I was just being polite. And she goes, no, you should do it. I was like, no. She was like, no, you should do it. I was like, no. You should do it. No. No, really, you should do it. No, I really shouldn't. She's like, no, you should do it. And I was like, no. She said, no, you'll be great. I'll be great? I said, do you know me? So you don't know nothing about me. So I could be an axe murderer. She goes, oh, would you like to teach 8th grade? Sisters, I guess 8th graders are a little tougher, right? So I said, lady, listen, I just started going back to church. There's no way I can teach anything about the faith. And she says, listen, we have no young men in our church. She says, just show up, sharpen pencils, be with the kids. I said, sharpen pencil, that's all I got to do. She said, that's it. I said, I can do that. I said, I don't have to teach. She says, no, you don't have to teach. I said, all right, I can do that. So I show up the first week, and the kids start asking me questions. I'm like, ask her. She's the teacher, So I go, that Sunday is my tradition, I go to my parents' house, and I'm talking to my mom, and I said, Mom, I started going back to church. Now, I made sure I went to a church that my parents did not go to, because I didn't want my mom knowing I was going to church, because my entire life, my mom said, you're going to be a priest. And I said, no, Mom, I'm not. She said, no, you're going to be a priest. So I would always tell my mom about all the terrible things I did, and she would always say, that's all right, you're going to be a priest one day. Right? So I said, Mom, I started going back to church. My mom goes, oh, yeah, I know. Okay. Mom, I started helping out teaching the 8th grade Sunday school. She goes, oh, yeah, I know. Who is this woman? I said, Mom, kids are asking me questions. I said, Mom, I don't know nothing. And she goes, oh, I know. My mom knew, right? I said, Mom, what do I do? How do I learn about God? And my mom gave me a set of rosary beads, a little pamphlet on how to pray. And she handed me a book by, I don't know if you've ever heard this guy, Scott Hahn. He writes excellent books on the faith. And so I started reading. And then I started to study Scripture. I really prayed. I prayed the rosary. I prayed the rosary every day. I even got a little CD that I could listen to on the way to work with John Paul II praying the rosary. So I get to pray the rosary with the Pope every day. I would tell people, yeah, I pray the rosary with the Pope all the time. So things started to change in my life. And that friend that I had taken to meet that religious ed teacher, he was getting ready to come into the Catholic Church. And that Lent, he had to go to confession. He was already a baptized Christian, so he needed to go to confession before he could receive First Communion and confirmation. So he calls me up and he says, hey, what are you doing Wednesday? I was like, what? Why? He goes, I got to go to confession. I was like, no, I'm busy. He's like, nah, come on. He's like, will you go with me? Come on, I got to go to the church. I got to do this confession thing. And I was like, no. He's like, come on. I was like, dude, I got plans. He's like, what do you got plans? We're best friends. We do everything together. I was like, anything but go to confession. And so he broke me down. I went with him. And it was the Lenten mission at the parish. And so we line up for confession. And as we're lined up for confession, we do what you're not supposed to do. We started talking to each other, right? Neither one of us knew any better. We're both idiots, right? So we start talking to each other, and I made sure he was in front of me in line because my plan was he's going to go to the confession, and I'm just going to bail out. And so as he's talking to me, we're like this, he starts talking to me, and then all of a sudden he's right behind me as this lady comes out of the confessional. And I'm next in line. And she holds the door. She's like, oh, come on. I'm looking at him, and he's like, oh, go. I was like, so I start walking slowly. I get to the confessional door, and I hear my friend say, oh, there's nobody with that priest. I'm going to go over there. I was like, I'm out. Perfect. And I hear the priest from inside the confessional, come on in. And I swear to you, everything went in slow motion. I had 1 foot in and 1 foot out of the door. And if the priest would have thrown a blessing to me, it would have been like the Matrix. I could have ducked. It would have gone right over like the bullets, you know. But no, I was like, that's it. All right, I'm here. I'm going in. So I go in, and I instantly go back to my first confession, my only confession. And I remember going to Catholic school, and so they had a special penance service for us, and we went in alphabetical order. My last name begins with a B, so I was third in line behind 2 girls. And I remember going to my first confession and kneeling. And I remember this because one of the girls that went before me kneeled as well, and she was very nervous. The kneeler was a little wet. So I come into the confessional, and I see the kneeler, and I see the chair, and I'm looking at the kneeler. I'm like, I'm not falling for that again. So I take the chair, and I move it as close as I can to the priest, and I start to stare him down. I'm like, I'm going to intimidate this guy. And I'm just staring at him. And the priest says, would you like to confess your sins? And I go, you want to hear my sins? Total attitude, still a jerk. And the priest looks at me and he goes, that's what I'm here for. And I was like, oh yeah. So I start to confess. And as I start to confess, I said, I hate my father. As I said this, all that hatred, all that jerkiness that was in me, I just felt a release. And as I said it, as I'm looking at the priest, I see over the priest the image of divine mercy. I'm sure many of you have seen this image. I had no devotion to this image at all at this time in my life. I started to cry, and I remembered the prayer that I prayed when my brother died. God, if you exist, prove it to me. And I could hear him saying to me, I'm proving it to you. Not only do I exist, but I exist in mercy. I exist in mercy, and I have been waiting for you. I can honestly say I left that confessional a different person. I walked out and I had those big, buggy red eyes from crying, which men in my family, we don't cry. I was crying. I was weeping. And I'm walking out to the car with my friend, and my friend's looking at me like, do I say something or do I not say something? And finally my friend goes, what did you do? And I couldn't speak. I couldn't speak. And as I started going more fervently to Mass, I started going to daily Mass. I remember bringing everything to God. I remember one Sunday we were at Mass and we were reciting the Creed. And you know that part in the Creed when we get to, I believe in one holy, Catholic, apostolic church. I stopped and I said, do I? Do I? Because I still lived a lot of sin. And I still held things against the church. And I started to think, do I know better? Do I know better than 2,000 years of not just tradition, but of study and knowledge of God? And I threw everything at the feet of Jesus. I said, I believe. Lord, I believe. My pastor was a great example of priesthood. At the time, he had asked me to go as a chaperone on a youth retreat called Steubenville Youth Conference. Some of you may have heard of it. And I went not knowing what to expect. And as I was going there, I remember thinking in my mind, I think I'm going to be a missionary. I want to go to Africa. I want to go to Africa. I want to be a missionary. I want to preach about Jesus. And I want to meet an African queen. And I want to marry her. And I want to just have a bunch of children with my African queen. And I was like, this is what I'm going to do for God. It was really for me. But this is what I'm going to do for God. And so there was a Eucharistic procession on the Saturday evening. And as Jesus himself is walking by, I'm thinking to myself, all right, Lord, what do you want to do? Just tell me. Africa, just say Africa. Tell me. I'm ready. I'm ready to go for you. And as the Lord walks by me, I hear clear as a bell. if you wish to be perfect, sell all that you own and come follow me. And all I could think of was the priesthood. And everybody around me is real charismatic, right? They've got their hands up. Yes, yes, Jesus, yes, Jesus. And there I am. No! I said it out loud. And I kind of, everybody stops and looks at me. I was like, I mean, no. No. God, please, not that. Send me a good Catholic girl. I will make you 50 priests. I will make you 80 nuns. God bless the woman who didn't marry me, huh? So I leave that retreat, and I meet a good Catholic girl. I was like, all right, I like this prayer thing. Knock and the door will be open. All right. So I start dating this good Catholic girl, and I ask her, I was like, oh, so did you go to college? She's like, yeah. I was like, oh, where did you go? She's like, oh, I went to Franciscan University at Steubenville. I was like, oh, that's cool. I said, what did you right after school, you just came back here? And she's like, oh, no. She goes, I went to New York and I joined the CFR Sisters for a little bit, for a couple of years. I was like, what? She's like, yeah, I was a nun for like 2 years. I was like, is it legal for me to date you right now? And she's like, yeah, I never made vows. You know, I was afraid. Like at the time, John Paul II was the Pope. I was going to get a knock. Be afraid, you know. I was like, so she's like, no, don't worry. And I was like, okay. So dating her, I would tease her about being a nun. And I would be like, what was it like being a nun? And she was like, well, you know, we would go and we would pray with the brothers, and we would go help out with the brothers at their youth center. We would go to the brothers and help at their homeless shelter. We would go to the brothers and pray in front of the abortion mills. And I was like, what brothers? What are you talking about, brothers? She says, you know, brothers. I was like, no, I know what fathers are. I know fathers, but what are brothers? And she goes, well, this community, most of the friars are brothers. Some are priests and some are brothers. And I was like, what the heck is a brother? And she says, well, they follow St. Francis, who heard the words of the gospel. If you wish to be perfect, sell all that you own and come follow me. I go, no. God sent me the good Catholic girl. No. I was like, I'm not following you. She's like, well, they're consecrated men, and they give their life completely to Jesus. They may not be priests, but they do his work. They do God's work. And I remember thinking, man, God, I don't like you very much right now. And I kept on dating this girl. She was a good Catholic girl. She was beautiful. And I went to meet her family. We were dating for a while. I went to meet her family. And the next day I asked her, I was like, so what'd your parents think? Like, oh, they really loved you. I was like, I'm in. And she said, yeah, my mom, she really liked you, but she says it's not going to work out. And I was like, what are you talking about? It's not going to work out. She goes, yeah, she thinks you're going to go up to New York and become a friar. I was like, shut up. Her mom was miraculously healed by Padre Pio from cancer. So I've got all this stuff going on, but I'm stubborn. And so I keep dating her. I'm blocking God completely. I'm saying my prayers, but I'm not listening. I start looking for engagement rings. We're talking about marriage. We're talking about whether we want to homeschool our kids, send them to Catholic school, or God forbid, send them to public school, right? And I remember just being able to not sleep at all. And so we're on a date one night. I'm driving her home. And I won't even look at her. I'm like, I think I need to go to New York and see about being a friar. And it was just dead silence. And she gets out of the car crying. A few days later, I'm in adoration at the parish. And I get up to leave. As I'm walking out, she's behind me crying. She calls me over. She hands me the information on how to get in contact with the friars. I thanked her. I walked out. So I walked out, another guy was coming in, held the door for them. I've been a friar 19 years. She's been married to the guy I held the door for 19 years. How good is God? How good is his mercy? When I joined the friars, my parents came to visit. And I sat down and had a long talk with my dad. My dad went to confession that week. My mom, who was always in church, now my dad is always in church. He joined the Knights of Columbus. He has changed his life completely. The man who I confessed that I hate became my best friend. It's all due to Jesus in the most blessed sacrament. Amen.
Thank you, Brother Joachim. All right, so for all of us who are preparing for confession, those of you who haven't gone yet, I'm just going to give a quick little word about confession, and maybe some of you don't know quite how to do it, or maybe you just need a little refresher. I know I do. Father Emmanuel gave me a little outline to give to you for confession, and he has the 5 C's of confession, just to help prepare your heart to receive, like Brother Joachim said, the mercy of Jesus as he's here with us and in the confessional. So the first C is confidence. Have confidence in God's mercy. God is so merciful. He loves you more than every love in the world combined, the love he has for you. The second one is be clear. So state your sins simply and clearly. And the third is concise. Just be brief, direct. You don't have to elaborate. You don't have to get into the details. Just share what you're confessing. Be complete. And then be contrite. Truly be sorry for your sins. There's no sin too big that God can't forgive, but because he loves us so deeply, his sorrow for us is so deep as his love is deep for us. And just to go over another examination of conscience, this goes over the 10 Commandments. The first one, do I put anything before God? Family, friends, my future career, money, others' opinions of me. Second, do I take God's name in vain? Do I curse? Do I use foul language? Do I curse others? Do I go to church every Sunday? Have I missed Mass on holy days of obligation? Do I honor and respect my parents, even if I don't always get along with them? Do I respect the elderly? Do I have anger or hate for a particular group of people? Why? Do I have violent thoughts towards others or myself? Have I ever physically hurt or attempted to hurt someone? Have I ever thought of killing anyone? Have I ever thought about or attempted to take my own life? Did I ever have an abortion or assist someone else in one? Have I ever done violence to my body by using drugs, alcohol, too much food, reckless driving, or taking foolish and dangerous risks? Have I ever entertained impure thoughts without praying for help? Am I sexually active in any kind of way outside the sacrament of marriage? Do I look at pornography? Have I been immodest in my dress or words or choice of entertainment? Have I taken anything that is not mine? Have I cheated at school? Have I stolen from work? Do I lie? If so, how often? Do I distort the truth to put others down and build myself up? Do I gossip and talk about others behind their backs? Am I jealous of others' gifts or talents? Am I grateful for the person God made me to be? Do I hate my body, my personality? Do I dwell too much on material possessions? Am I content with what I have? Do I share generously with others, especially those in need? We ask the Lord for His grace to make a good confession. We ask for His mercy would flow down upon us. And I invite you at any point during the night, after maybe you've made your confession or before you leave, if you would so like to come, kneel before the Lord. Here, I'll put out another kneeler, just to be close to Him. The Lord truly loves it when we come close to Him. It is His joy to receive us as His children. Don't be afraid of the Lord's mercy and His great love for you.